Thank you very much for joining us today for the Best Practices for Collecting Field Data Digitally webinar presented by Layer. My name is Michael Calkins. I am the Customer Success Director at Layer. That is my direct email address there, michael@layer.team. Definitely jot that down. If you have any questions following this webinar, if you'd like to discuss how the process I'm going to show you later might apply to your specific project or how your office or team might be able to implement this workflow, definitely reach out to me. I'm happy to set up a follow-up call and talk through that. So the topic today is best practices for collecting field data. But what we're really talking about is not just the process of collecting the data, but what it is that that data really should entail. Now, through experience and through use on various projects, at Layer, we've determined that data really needs to be flexible, and not just the data, but the process of collecting field data really should be flexible. It's often the situation where when working on an existing project, perhaps doing a renovation, maybe you're doing a field assessment or facilities audit of a school, that you set foot on site and you discover things are not exactly as you had thought they would be. So as you are collecting data, it's best if you have a platform in which you can collect data in a flexible way. You can modify the types of data or select how that data is actually recorded. We've also found it's extremely important, and this might be really the most important aspect of field data, is that it needs to be contextualized. If you spent days out on site, perhaps in a distant location far from your office, collecting information, when you get back to the office, you might find that a folder full of photographs, a checklist, some random drawings with notes, all these different forms of information might be difficult to use because there's no contextualized, there's no context assigned or attributed to those items. I've got 25 photos of a room. Which room was it? So if we can contextualize that information, it becomes extremely powerful, extremely useful as we move through the project life cycle. It's also best if the information can be gathered and made to be collaborative, so that if you have a team of individuals working on a project, working on, say, a site assessment, that those individuals can communicate and can view each other's information and comment on each other's recordings in real time. And then lastly, whenever possible, it'd be great if that information can be integrated and made available in other applications. Today, what we're specifically going to be focusing on is integrating that information with Revit. We'll take a look at how we accomplish that towards the end of the presentation. Now, as I mentioned, having information, good field data at the beginning of a project, having recorded that information, it's extremely beneficial and very important that information be flexible. But the main reason for that, what we're trying to get at here, is that that information is useful throughout the life cycle of a project. Today, the attendees today are probably most interested in, say, like the design phase and the construction phase or CA phase of a project. But information that is gathered about a project in the field is extremely helpful downstream, can be very helpful downstream to the operators of a particular, the owners and operators of a particular facility. We're going to be focusing today mostly on the pre-design phase of collecting the data, and then as we move into the design phase, we'll take a look at how that information can be, because it is contextualized and connected to Revit, how it becomes even more powerful by having it accessible immediately at your fingertips when you are working in your design model. Now, you might say, well, I understand that that's all familiar to me. That's what I've always tried to do, is have my information to be to create some context, to tag and things like that. The problem is currently what a lot of users find themselves doing is using various applications to not only record the information, but then to distribute or share the information. I'm sure you all have found yourself searching through Outlook or whatever your preferred email application might be to find that one email in which somebody sent you a photograph that they took while they're on site. You want to now combine that or connect that to one of the rooms. You probably already have spreadsheets and folders full of photographs, some of which maybe you've titled them according to the context in which they were taken. But you also have a Revit model, and you probably have even information that was shared through text messages or through instant messaging platforms. All this information, though, it tends to create silos. There's no horizontal integration across these. If you want to find information when you're working your model, you've got to go up the silo and back down another one in order to find the folder in which you had saved 150 separate images of your existing projects. Now, that's exactly the situation that our parent company, BVH Architecture in Lincoln, Nebraska, found themselves in when they began a 10-year project on the Nebraska State Capitol. Initially, the process started out in the typical method of taking measurements with a tape measure, jotting things down on a piece of paper, perhaps a set of drawings, checklists, spreadsheets that were manually being filled out, and then additionally, taking photographs of everything that needed to be cataloged. But here was the major problem. The project entailed over 1,300 rooms and over 1,100 windows that had to be meticulously documented. BVH was collecting 57 data points per room and over 20 data points per window, which added up to a combined total of about 100,000 data points. That's just the information that was being recorded by a person and entered into some form of spreadsheet or something similar. In addition to that, though, there were almost 40,000 photographs taken of the various aspects of the project. All of those were just being saved in folders as well. So what happens then, as the project continues, and a beautiful Revit model gets built from the construction documents on hand, and you begin to go through the process of reconciling the data which was collected in the field with the Revit model which was built separately. How do we know that this window here is in fact as it was designed, or was it modified in some way after the fact? Well, in order to accomplish and to solve that problem of the building data being completely separate from the Revit model, BVH developed what we now call layer. So this is the process as we feel today, based on the best practices that BVH was trying to follow while working on the capital project. It became this process now. So I'm going to walk you through this here in step by step. I'm going to switch over to layer in a moment, but this is the overall process. What we need to do is create a project. What we're going to do is create a project in which all the data is going to be saved, and we're going to then invite other team members to join us in that project. So this is that collaborative aspect I mentioned earlier. We're going to then create categories. Categories are the top level bucket in which by which we're going to divide our information. And then within those categories, we are going to create what are referred to as elements. Elements are the individual items that need to be recorded, that need to be measured or cataloged. The fields that we are about to create, we will then create, are the individual pieces of information. We're going to see how those can be created ahead of time, or we can create them on the fly. And then we're going to actually record that information out in the field. So we'll walk through how to fill in that information. We're going to look at filling in individual fields. We're going to take a look at how we can also take photos on the fly. So this is that contextualized aspect. If I walk into a specific room and I want to record information and take photos of it, when I do that, it's going to be tied instantly without any further effort to the room that I have chosen to document. We're also going to take a look then at quickly at how we can use the notes and task features within Layer to add additional information that doesn't necessarily cleanly fit into, say, a field or can be documented in a photo. We'll take a look at how we can run reports on that. Obviously, once you have gathered the information, it might be helpful just to have it available to you when you're working in Revit to update and inform the way that your model is built. But we also want to be able to run reports. Maybe you want to output then a list of the deficiencies which were noted. Now we'll note that this is specifically what we're talking about as sort of a field audit pre-design process, but this can also be very easily translated into, say, a punch list. That's essentially gathering data in the field. We can run the same process to create punch lists, but we're not going to focus on that in particular today. Okay, so let's go ahead and switch over to layer. So as I mentioned, what we need to do when we first start out is to create a project. Now, actually, let me pause for a second as well. I do want to mention we are today showing the new layer interface. So any of you who've joined us today who have seen layer in the past will notice that it will look somewhat different. We are going to unveil and we're going to release the new layer user interface here very shortly, but you're all getting a kind of a sneak peek of what we have in store here. So typically with the way you would start out is you click the new project button here, and of course you got to give your project a name, you give it a location, and then we do have some templates to help you get started. We're just going to kind of skip all this stuff now so I don't have to create it from scratch. But you do have the ability to create as many projects as you like within Layer. I have already created a great project here called Awesome Elementary School, so I'm going to go ahead and click on that and jump into there. I've kind of pre-baked a cake here so you can see what an ongoing project might look like. So really quickly, let me give you a tour around the interface first before we dive a little bit deeper into the process. So what we have here on the left panel is sort of our highest level overview of our project. Here at the very top, obviously I can see the team members I've invited. This is the great thing about Layer. You can invite as many people as you'd like to a project so that they can also contribute to that, to the data collection. We then have a section for categories. This is what I mentioned before, where we will break up our information according to our needs. Now, depending on the type of project you have, you might divide up your data in different ways. But what we've done here is created a category for locations. So this is going to be not just things like my classrooms and corridors and different rooms of a particular building. In this case, it's a school. But this might also be things like the exterior elevations of my project. If I need to catalog information about the masonry on the outside, I can do that. We've also then divided the individual types of information we're going to gather. Because this is an audit of a school, we decided we need to record life safety issues we encounter, accessibility issues we encounter, and then just general deficiencies. Now these categories are built, they're created and named however you like. These are just some examples I've created. We can also see here we'll have a place to store files and access additional files that we attribute to any of these projects, photos, floor plans, things like that. In this case, I've uploaded the previous construction document set for my school. And then we'll take a look at some of these other options here on the left side as we move forward. Now in the middle of the screen here, what we have is the element view. So if I click on my locations category, I will then see a card for each of the locations which I have already created in this project. And then if I were to select one of these elements, in this case, Classroom 163, I then see on the far right side a panel, which will then display to me all the contextual information for Classroom 163. I see the fields of data that I need to record. Additionally, if I have separate files that I've uploaded attributed to this classroom, those will be under this tab. I can create those tasks and then view the past activity for any of these elements if they have previously been modified. All right, so I mentioned before that the process is to first create a project, invite your team members, but then to begin to lay out the project. Now, typically we would try to build our project to the extent possible before we set foot out in the field. Ideally, you would already have a list of the elements, let's say the locations which need to be documented. If you already have a set of drawings, maybe you have a list of the classrooms and the individual rooms within a project, you can go through and begin to build out the different elements here. So let's take a look at what that might entail. So I'm going to, well, and I should mention though, if you find yourself in a situation where you don't have that information ahead of time, you have to simply go to the site and then begin to record the information as you go. That is possible as well with Layer. It's very flexible in that way. And the great thing is that you can do this on your laptop, you can do it on a tablet, you can be doing this on your phone, iPhone or Android. You can add information as you go. So in either case, when I get to the point where I need to add a room to my project, what I need to do is click my little create an element button here and simply give it a name. Now it does auto increment, but I'm going to call this one Classroom 170, create that element, and we'll see it pop up here on screen. Now when I select this, because I have already taken the time to begin to create some of the fields of information I want to record, we'll see that my new classroom I just added already has a list of fields of information to be filled out. I don't have to create a list of items for every single room. All of these fields will be shared across all the elements in this category. In this case, it's my locations category. So let's take a look then a little bit deeper at the fields that we see displayed here on the right side of the screen. And I should mention, I see a few more people have joined us. I'll just mention again, I'm keeping an eye on the Q&A section. If you do have questions as I go along, please do. I really encourage you to enter information here in the Q&A section. I have a couple colleagues here online with me as well who are monitoring that, and either they'll answer them directly to you or I'll try to answer them as we go along. So again, getting back here to the fields, since I've already created a few fields, I can now just create a new room to record and start to fill out the information. In this case, I have an inspected by. I happen to be inspecting this classroom, so I'll add my name here. This will give me a list of all the team members which I've invited. We have these additional fields for deficiencies, life safety, and ADA issues. Now, you might recognize those names because I noted earlier that I've created separate categories in which I'm going to catalog those specific issues. So what I've created here is what's called a related element. And I'm not going to go too deep dive into this, but what I'm going to say is that, well, I've walked in this classroom and I've noted some deficiencies. And I see here, well, I already have a list. I've already recorded a few deficiencies while I've been walking the site. I noticed there was a broken floor tile earlier. There was a bent downspout outside before I even got in the building. And there was a bunch of other issues here. So if I come in this classroom and see, well, I see another cracked mortar joint, I can go ahead and select that item, click the checkbox, and I now have a cracked mortar joint deficiency noted. But I might walk in there and say, well, in addition to that, the carpet is stained badly. Well, I don't see that on the list here, so I'm going to note that the carpet is stained. So I go ahead and type out my new deficiency, and then I click the button to create a new item. So now, as I go along, I can begin to build out my list of deficiencies. But what's great is because I have added this information, not as just a text box that I type out carpet stained, but I added it as a specific deficiency item, I can reuse that element and I can record later how many carpet stained notes I made. The same goes for life safety issues. You probably already know, have a list of life safety issues which you're going to be looking for on site, but should you encounter something besides just required exit not provided, you can create your list on the fly. In this case, I'm just going to say we have a pre-existing item that I'm going to add, and I can just go through and I begin to fill out these fields by either selecting from an existing item or creating new items on the fly. And you'll notice that in a bit, when I create this item, carpet stained, I can also then go into my other classrooms and add that same issue if I note it there. In addition to that, I can take photos. And let's take a look here. You can't see my phone obviously here, but I'm going to go ahead and go into, on my phone, I'm viewing Classroom 170. I've pulled that up and I'm walking through my project. I don't have to be carrying around my laptop in one arm and trying to use the trackpad and type things as I go. I can actually have this on my phone, and when I pull up, what I've done on my phone is I've actually clicked on this Add File button, and it asks me if I want to use my camera to take a photo. And now I can say, well, I do in fact have Take a nice picture of my spider plant. And having taken that photo on my phone, it will automatically be shared with the entire team. Now it's recorded right here as part of Classroom 170. So I mentioned earlier, rather than just taking a bunch of photos on your phone or with a camera, dropping them into a folder and having to later try to determine which room that photo was taken in, by starting from Classroom 170 and taking the photo right here, that photo is automatically attributed to this classroom. If I jump over here to Gym 110, I don't see any photos here. I don't see that same photo. I know this photo is only related to Classroom 110. Now, as we go along, though, you might find once you've set foot on site that there's something else you need to document. Maybe you hadn't accounted for a particular type of information. In this case, let me actually delete that one. I meant to delete that before my great presentation. So perhaps you set foot on site, you're walking through and you realize, oh, we were supposed to also record the number of student desks we find in each classroom. Well, I don't have a place to add that right now. So what I'm going to do is add my own field. So I click the Edit Fields button, and this can be done either on the laptop or on your phone. I see the list of fields I have already created, but I'm going to actually create a new field. And in this case, we see here when I click the plus button, I get a list of the 20 different field types which are available to me. So we do have things like a barcode scanner field. You can record information like the time and the person who created a particular element, dates, and things like that. But we also have things like basic text inputs and number inputs. So I'm going to select the, try that again, clicked in the wrong spot. I'm going to select the number input. I'm going to give it a name of number of student desks. And I'll just go ahead and save that field. And we'll see then it places it at the bottom of the list. I do have the ability to move those fields around should I choose to do so. So now I can go and close this field. And when I click on my Classroom 170, I'll see that there is an option for entering the number of desks that I record. So I'm going to say this classroom had 24 student desks. Now, when I add the field here to Classroom 170, I will note that it does show that same field in every other element. So it will also show it in the lobby. Obviously, I sure hope not anyway, the lobby shouldn't have any student desks. So this is one of the discussions that I'd be happy to have with you if you're trying to determine how best to divide up your information among categories. That's where I'm available to help to assess your project, help you make these determinations. So let's also take a look at a couple other field types we can create, or one in particular. So I've also decided, or I've determined, as I'm assessing each location on my project, I also need to report a general condition. Perhaps you've got a predetermined list of 1 through 5 representing different states of disrepair or condition. So what I'm going to do is, again, I can click on any of these elements. Maybe I'll just jump over here to Classroom 163. I'm going to say Edit Field, Add a Field, and I'm going to choose another field here called Range Input. So when I choose Range Input, again, I have to give all my fields a name. I'll call this one General Condition. And I'm just going to go with, actually, I'm going to adjust this. So let's go to a minimum of 0, actually 1, and a maximum, using the wrong button there, minimum of 0, maximum of 5, and then save that field. And let's go ahead and slide that one to the top as well. And we'll see now I have a general condition slider. So if I go in there, rather than typing, I'm going to type the number, I can just slide this over. And looks like maybe I've uncovered a little bit of a glitch. There we go. That's what was happening there. So I've walked into this classroom and I've determined that this classroom is just generally at a condition of 3. and we probably have a key for what that would represent that we've already determined. All right, so let's see. A couple other things that we can also do then, as we're recording information, again, we can add information, we can add additional locations. If I needed to record maybe the east elevation, I just click the plus sign and add that, and all of these fields will automatically be available in that new element. But you'll also notice we have a few other tabs here across the top of the screen. So if I go to, let me find the one that I'm specifically referencing here. I have added, here we go. So I walk into my classroom, and perhaps one of the issues I'm going to note here, I walk into classroom 163, and I see that, well, in that room, I notice that there is a cracked mortar joint. So I'm going to go ahead and add that item to this listed as a deficiency. So now as I go into the, once I've added the cracked mortar joint as a deficiency within this room, if I wanted to view more information about the mortar joint issue itself, I can select this little button. You see, then it takes me to my deficiencies here, my deficiencies category, and then I can see that I have cracked mortar joint listed as an issue. In this case, I decided, well, I actually also wanted to track specific information about my cracked mortar joint deficiency, so I created a file field called photos, and then I took a photo of that mortar joint. When I select that issue, got to delete that too. When I select that photo, it actually opens up the photo itself and gives me the ability not only to view that photo and zoom around and zoom in on the photograph, I have a series of markup tools available to me. In this case, what I actually want to do is mark a little bit for easier notation. I want to mark where the crack was highlighted or uncovered. So I'm going to trace here besides this mortar joint here, and I'm going to say there's also one running along this corner right here. We have some text tools here. If you like, you can actually type text. We even have measurement tools and various types of markup tools which are available not only in images. I'll show you in a little bit. We also can view PDFs and mark those up as well. So let me go ahead and close that photo. So I can additionally, again, if I was on my phone, I could click the add file button and take more photos of this particular deficiency here. So getting back to categories here, just keeping on the questions and answers here. I don't see anything coming in, so keep going here. Again, the reason that layer is more powerful than just your typical clipboard and pen method and roll of drawings method is that what we're doing here, what we're proposing is that you really create a database of information. We're not just going to simply create a room with a bunch of fields and just type a bunch of information here. What we end up in that situation is simply a list of text boxes. What we've done here is created a database of information, which then allows us to slice and dice those items however we wish. The great thing is now, in this case, as I've filled out information, I can not only view the different rooms and then view the information visible here, I can filter the rooms according to certain properties. So I can say, I would like to view a list of my rooms containing the deficiency of broken floor tile. And I see, well, in this case, only the lobby showed broken floor tile, but perhaps what I want to say is that maybe I want to see, show me the locations with a life safety of required exit not provided. So then we see, well, the classroom, the gym, and the lobby all have that same issue. Additionally, you can sort according to these different fields you've created. And now we have the ability to actually show information within each of these cards. So rather than having to select each room in order to view the data, all the data that I've collected, I can actually now go through and say, well, I would like to show in each of these cards the deficiencies, the life safety, and the accessibility field. So now I can see quickly, and let me actually just delete that filter. So now, again, I can get a nice overview of the situation on my project. I can see this classroom actually only had a deficiency, no life safety or ADA issues, but this classroom 170 actually had a lot of issues going on. If I want to learn more, I can select 170, and now I can see all that information there. Okay, so a few other things we want to highlight now. So I've gone through, I've begun to take a assessment of my project. And we'll see here though, when I select on each of these items, again, there are other pieces of information which can be tracked. Now we do have a files tab. This will allow you to upload not only photographs, but if you had additional information, perhaps you have, if we get into the process, we're actually going to have a couple webinars coming up on the FF&E workflows. Perhaps you want to create a catalog of pieces of furniture or equipment and assign cut sheets to each of those. We can then click the plus sign, and this will allow us to upload any file type we want, images, PDFs, Word documents, things like that. We can also create notes as we go along. So we can say, actually, I click here on the notes, and I see Zach has actually, my teammate has already jumped in here and said, has this room been verified yet? And so I can come in here and I'll see he's talking about classroom 163. He's saying, and I'll just say yes, and then I will submit that note. And so there's a sort of a log here. This is the real-time communication we can use within the system. Zach didn't have to text me or pull me up on Slack, and then we end up with two separate chains of communication. We can do everything right here in the app. We can also assign tasks. In this case, Jeff has a task assigned to him to assess the furniture in this room. Now, I can say, we can create tasks quickly here. You'll see here at the bottom of that screen. So I can say, verify whatever it might be he needs to do. And when I submit that task, it wasn't assigned, but if I select it, it pops open a window where I can then assign it not only a person, but I can say, well, it needs to be done tomorrow. Specifically, it's already tagged as 163. So again, it's already contextualized. And then I can say, let's assign this to Zach. Now, when Zach gets a notification, he's not just gonna get some random notification that says verify this classroom and he's gotta go figure out what I was talking about. It's already contextualized. It's assigned to classroom 163. On his computer, he will get a notification that he can select, and it will navigate him directly to classroom 163 and then show him the task I have assigned to him. And additionally, when I select this last option for activity, I can now go through and view a record of what has transpired with regard to classroom 163. I can see that I made a change to these fields, and it went from empty to listing cracked mortar joint. Let's see if anybody else has been in some of these. I think my colleagues have made a few changes in here. I'm not seeing where they are though. Maybe they haven't. What's great though is I can also revert a particular change. So if I come in here and say, well, Zach actually made a change, I later determined that that was not an appropriate modification. I can undo that particular change and roll back that item to the previous version. That might be something that actually, so I am demoing the beta version right now. There might be something that hasn't yet been made live, but yeah, eventually, oh, there it went. So eventually I can roll back any particular element to a previous state. Now, if I want to view more, get a holistic picture though of everything that's gone on in my project, I can also click this activity button on the far left over here, and I'll see this is all activity through the life of my project. And again, you can go through here, rather than going by element by element, you can see all the changes that have occurred, date and time, what the actual change was, what it affected. And you can again revert any of these changes back to the previous state. Okay, so quick check on time here. Okay, so as we've been going through here, again, kind of reset the picture. So we've created the project. We had either a list of the items to be verified prior to setting a foot on site, or we had to create it on the fly. Either one is perfectly fine. You can select this item, add elements as you go along. We've gone through, we're out on site, we've begun to record information. We're walking around the site, though, we might determine, well, turns out I'm not as familiar with the project, or I'm not really sure where all the rooms lie. I'm having trouble determining where I am within the larger project. So one of the best practices, obviously, if you're going to go do a site assessment, is to have as many documents available as possible. Existing floor plans. I know in some cases you're probably just working from a photograph you took of the egress panel by the front door. We can save all that information right here in Layer. So rather than having to pull out the roll of drawings and lay it out on a table, in fact, in this day and age, you're probably trying to reduce the number of items that you're even carrying into another project that have to be physical items that have to be touched and sanitized and all that. So instead, what we're going to do is upload those relevant files here into the files area. So what I have here is, in this case, the 100% CD set. This was maybe the as-built or the documents for the original construction of the project. I've uploaded this PDF. So now I've got that right there at my fingertips. In this case, it's just sort of loosely saved in the files section. But what I might want to do, and what oftentimes happens, is that rather than just having it as a file, you might create a special category. Let's create this category called project drawings. Because we're talking about gathering field data, we're just kind of assuming that these are as-built or scans of old drawings or whatever it might be. And so what we might choose to then do is create individual sets here of, let's say, original drawings, and we can divide up. We can again choose how we divide up information within our project. This is the great thing about layers. It's extremely flexible. You get to select how your data is divided up. But because it is a database and because we have the ability to interrelate items, we can save data and organize it however we wish, but then still take advantage of the data in different categories by relating those items to one another. There we go. Okay, so again, let's take a look then. Let's explore some of this information, how this interrelation works, and then I'm going to talk about creating some reports. So I've gone through and I've begun to note deficiencies, and you'll see here that I have added a cracked mortar joint, not only to classroom 163, I noted that in classroom 170, and perhaps I've noted it in several places. So I come over here to my deficiencies category, and I'll see here's a list of all the deficiencies I've uncovered, and if I select the cracked mortar joint issue in particular, I can see that I've actually noted that problem on the north elevation when I was walking around the outside of the project. I've noted it here in classroom 170, and I've noted it in classroom 163. So because we've created that issue, the deficiency, and then assigned it in each of the classrooms, I can then get a report not only of what each classroom contains, so I can view my list of deficiencies from the classroom level, or I can go into the deficiencies and view where does a particular deficiency occur throughout my project. Again, this is far more powerful than simply jotting down notes as we go, which really just in the end provide you a list of items, not really a holistic view of that project. So we've gone through, we've done our sidewalk, we've gone through and cataloged all the deficiencies. My colleagues, Jeff, Zach, Jessica, and myself we've gone through, spent a couple days on site. We're confident we've tracked everything. We haven't lost anything, or we're not going to be confused by the data we've collected once we're back in the office and end up having to send the intern back out to the site to take more photos because we're not sure what we did with any particular piece of information. We've got it all tracked right here and only here in Layer. So what do? Well, at this point, we can begin to run reports. So we'll see here, there's a reports button here. And I do apologize, we're having a little bit of technical difficulty here. I think we maybe pushed an update just before I started the webinar, and our reports aren't actually generating here. But what we can do is build a report. Let me go and show you what creating a new report looks like. So I click the little plus button down here in the bottom right, and I see here that I can give my name a report. It does auto date the item. So maybe I actually want to call this one issues, or maybe even, let's say it's an 88 issues report, and I'm going to select the category which I'm going to report. So I select the 88 issues category, and when I do that, I can then select, well, what is it I'm going to report? In this case, I want to report everything, all the data that was collected regarding 88 issues. And then I can choose from the list here the output type. Again, if you used layer, have used layer in the past, previously you only had the ability to output a CSV file, which you could then open in Excel. We have now given you the ability to export directly to the Excel file format, or to create a PDF. And what's great about the PDF is that will include photographs as well as the other information which you have recorded. So if you wanted to provide a report to your client of the information that was cataloged and the photos you took on site, you can output a PDF here. When you generate report, typically what would happen is it will generate the report right here in layer, and where you currently see the spinning wheel, you would get a little icon that says download PDF or download XLS file. Oh, there we go. And I can then click the download for PDF, and we'll see there that it then gives me a list of all of the 88 issues which were uncovered. I see that the millwork not compliant was found in the lobby. I didn't have any photos. It was also found in classroom 170. So you can see quickly you can provide this information in different ways, either as a table or as a PDF document. I should have picked something else to add some photos there, but hopefully you get the idea of what reporting looks like there. Okay, so we're down to the last 15 minutes. Again, I'll encourage everybody, if there's questions about any of what I've shown you so far in layer, definitely type that in the Q&A. I'm going to make a little transition here, though. We're going to take a look at how this information then can be surfaced and contextualized is the term we really like to use when we are working in Revit. But I'm going to do a little smoke and mirrors here. Let me just go ahead and switch over to Revit, actually. So I have a project here. What we're working here is a school building, and we have here the floor plan, of course, where we're laying out this project. Perhaps we've built this project, maybe it's a new construction project or it's an existing project we're doing a renovation on, whatever it might be. We've created the model, and we also have then all of this rich data that we've collected over in the layer platform. Now, through the layer add-in, I can connect my Revit model to my layer documentation. Now, I've taken a few steps. I'm not going to go in depth and show you how the setup process, but essentially what it allows me to do is connect individual Revit items to the different types of information I've recorded here in layer. And what happens is once I have made this connection, I can select items in my model and surface the data here in layer instantaneously. When I select cafeteria, the room itself within the model, because I have live link turned on, layer in the dashboard will show me cafeteria 121. If I go up to, let's go up to second floor here, and I go and select the lounge here on the second floor, I see it will jump to lounge 223, show me that information. Now, what's great about this is if this was my as-built model and I needed to view the information I recorded about the lounge, I could select it here in the model, and then layer would show me instantaneously the photos that I took while I was on site. It would show me the additional notes I took. If there's any particular deficiency note that I then wanted to note here on the project, I would see all of that immediately accessible. Now, taking it one step further, we're actually going to explore this more in our FF&E and medical equipment planning webinars this coming Thursday and next Tuesday. But you do also have the ability to navigate here within layer and begin to adjust information in layer and have that information populate Revit parameters. So we're not going to go too deep into that, but we'll see here if I were to adjust the floor in my lounge 2230, which I see listed right here, my lounge 223, sorry. I see lounge 223 in my schedule, and I see that the floor parameter has not been filled out yet. But if I sync my parameters, I'll see that it actually noted that there was a change. The floor finish was changed to polished concrete. And when I accept that change, because I made the change in layer, it will then push that change back through to my Revit model. What's great about this is that one of my colleagues could have logged in the layer, gone through while they're on site and say, well, I'm just going to walk around the project. I don't have access to the Revit model. I don't even know how to use Revit, but I've been charged with noting the finishes of the walls, the wall base, the floor, and the ceilings. I'm just going to go ahead and note those on my phone in the layer app and save it and forget about it. Back at the office, once you are informed that those changes have been saved, you just hit your sync parameters button and your existing materials finish schedule is automatically filled out for you. You didn't have to go in and modify those by reading a spreadsheet on one screen and typing in the appropriate information in your Revit model. There is a two-way connection there. Okay, so let me switch back here. That is the overall process. So just again to review, what we did through, what we had to do was create the project. Of course, we had to create a starting point in which all the data is going to be shared. We then went through and determined how we're going to categorize information. Locations, do we want rooms and elevations, or do you want your rooms and elevations in separate categories? It's up to you. It's very flexible. And again, if you want to look at one of your projects, I'm happy to help and talk through how you divide that information up. We then create the elements. Those are the individual rooms, the individual elevations, or the individual pieces of furniture that we need to catalog. And then we create the field in which the data will be stored. And we just then go out on site. And the great thing is, once we're on site, if things need to change, if we need to add a different field or adjust the way that a field is filled out or the way that piece of information is recorded, we can do that on the fly. The data is preserved. We don't lose any data. We just change things as we go. We can also take photos and attach them directly to the items we're cataloging. We can take notes and we can assign tasks. Once we're done, we can take advantage of that data though. This is the real powerful part, is that we can then report that information with the relevant data. We don't have to combine, create a report that says, in room 160, we found these issues. Let me go find a photograph and then place it on the document. It's already there. It's already combined. And we can then access that information right from inside of Revit. We don't have to pull up two separate applications and try to find a photo and find the room and figure out how those two relate to one another. So, as we mentioned before, what we feel the best practices, the things that you probably already knew about what made for good quality field data, is that it is flexible and that we are able to create contextualized information and we can share it in real time and we can access it in Revit. That's exactly how Layer was designed. It was built to solve these specific needs based on a real world scenario, a real world problem that needed to be solved. So just real quick, we do have a few minutes left. Again, I encourage you to feel free to type any questions in there. I do realize I wasn't monitoring the chat window, so if anyone was typing anything in the chat, I didn't see anything coming up in there. So definitely feel free to send any questions. We do have 2 more webinars coming up. On Thursday, I'll be conducting a webinar on the FF&E workflow as connected to Revit. So we're going to see how we can place elements, FF&E elements in our Revit model, connect them to layer, and then again, use layer to track those items through their life cycle. You can track things from the inception of the project all the way through the final placement of that FF&E item in the project if you wish. We're also going to take a look at how that FF&E workflow applies to the medical equipment planning